It's easy to see the common signs of transmission trouble.
If your engine revs before it falls into gear.
If it seems to switch gears for no reason.
If shifts are rough, lurching, or clunking.
So watch for the signs.
Because catching it early could mean repair instead of replacement.
And if you do need transmission work, be sure to call.
Certified Transmission, the job done right at the right price.
Find a location near you at certifiedtransmission.com.
Ameristar Council Bluffs was voted best casino in the area for a reason. You'll find more than 1,200 slots and a variety of table games, all available 24/7. We have multiple restaurants, including a buffet, with all-you-can-eat crab legs on Fridays, prime rib on Saturdays, and brunch on Sundays. An action-packed sports bar and a sports book with the best odds in town. Your best bet for entertainment is Ameristar Council Bluffs. Must be 21 to enter casino. Terms subject to change. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me as always, he's a dangerous man with some money in his pocket. Keep up. Here is the captain.
It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
This week, we are proud to be featuring Weird and Gilly IPA by the brilliant brewers at Single Cut Beersmiths. Some cat from Japan suggested that Single Cut Beersmiths do an IPA that is Juicy, and here is the delicious, amazing result. Weird and Gilly is an IPA featuring slightly tangy malts, bright citrus notes, rounded out with some tropical fruit and a mild pine hoppiness, making this the complete package. Garage grade 4 out of 5 bottle caps. And how about we pass around some praise? First up, a big shout out to Ashley in Jackson Center, Ohio. And how about a little sidecar action? Here's a shout out to Dan the Man, also in Jackson Center.
And a big We Like Your Jib goes to Kelly from Huntsville, Alabama.
Next up, here's a shout to Brenda Whitman in Paragould, Arkansas. And how about a Big Sky Country shout out to Mariah in Colstrip, Montana. And last but certainly not least, we have a shout out to the Spiders from Mars. All of those great folks went to truecrimegarage.com and contributed to the beer fund. And for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWERRUN Beer Run. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, go do it. It's free. Tons of content being put out every week. That's where I'm releasing all the old episodes of Off the Record, so you can check those out there. And Colonel, that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime.
Murder investigation involving a woman and her dog stabbed at Piedmont Park. Atlanta police now saying they want to talk with half a dozen potential witnesses. The mayor and police chief publicly discussing this case for the first time today, stressing the investigation is still very active, but at this time they are unable to name a suspect or make an arrest. Joe Henke had the chance today to bring your questions about this case to police. Joe?
Sheba, today Atlanta police gave us images from security cameras posted directly outside of Piedmont Park. The images aren't the greatest quality, but if police can identify and talk with the people pictured, they believe it might lead to a break in the case.
40-year-old Katie Janness and her dog Bowie were last pictured at the Rainbow Crosswalk at 10th and Piedmont. Soon after, police responded to Piedmont Park after both were killed, with Janness being stabbed. Now police are asking for 6 potential witnesses to come forward. 3 individuals here exiting the park around 11:54 p.m. on Tuesday at 10th and Charles Allen. 12:25 a.m. on Wednesday, a person appearing to leave the park at 12th and Piedmont, and someone else, same intersection, at 12:43 a.m. Finally, another person at 12:46 back at 10th and Charles Allen.
So let's be clear, those are not suspects. Those are individuals that we know were inside the park, and we just want to know what they saw.
What Atlanta police have not released are any security camera images from inside the park.
We are still working with vendors to try and determine if there's any information we can get off of those cameras.
John Keene, Chief Operating Officer for the City of Atlanta, says there are 9 cameras inside Piedmont Park that use older technology and are unable to integrate with the city's more modern camera system. So images from the cameras in the park cannot be retrieved as easily, if at all.
A lot of false information that is being spread. It is not helpful to this investigation.
Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom says as of now, there is no indication to support rumors of the case being linked to a serial murderer, nor is there any indication this was a hate crime. Beyond calling the murder gruesome and saying Janness was stabbed multiple times, few specifics of the crime have been released. Today, Deputy Chief Charles Hampton described why.
There are things that only the individual or individuals responsible for this know. This is very important when we apprehend them. This is what we use as to further our case in order to bring them to justice.
And Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Bryant today said he decided last week to call the FBI in to assist with this case because this murder is unique and outside the norm, he said, of what they typically see. But he didn't explain what made the murder unique. He added, though, the FBI has many resources and it's best to include them earlier rather than later in the investigation.
Catherine Janness, who went by Katie, grew up in Detroit, Michigan. In 2006, as a young adult, she relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, deliberately choosing the progressive liberal city's Midtown neighborhood. It was a welcoming environment for those interested in the arts and involved in the LGBTQ community. One of Katie's first jobs in Atlanta was a bar manager gig for the Whole World Improv Theater. Katie was a musician, writing songs, expressing her political views, and playing guitar in some local bands at the time as well. But I can attest to this, and the captain will back me up. Music doesn't always pay the bills, so she had to continue working these other jobs. She worked as a bartender at the Midtown restaurant Campagnolo for several years. The establishment was right down the street from her and her partner's apartment and was situated at the intersection of 10th Street and Piedmont Avenue, where the Washington Post describes the rainbow crosswalks denote the area's significance as the center of the LGBTQ community and a haven. At work, Katie was known to be friendly and kind, sweet, a little geeky, as one regular patron described her, but she was not the rowdy bartender type, throwing down shots and hooking up with patrons. No, she collected books, wrote poetry, and songs.
I love the geeks of the world. Geeks of the world, unite.
Unite. We are all holding hands. Sweaty palms. Katie met her partner, Emma Clark. I believe this was sometime in 2014, Captain. Emma was 10 years younger than Katie, but the two were inseparable. And by 2021, Katie and Emma were trying to save up money for a down payment to buy their first home together. But for now, they lived in upper middle class Midtown Atlanta, a generally safe area that was filled with restaurants, bars, and a thriving music scene. Makes sense given Katie's personality and music background. Katie and Emma had 2 dogs. One was a 14-year-old female dog named Tori, and the other was a 3-year-old dog named Bowie.
Guessing she named the dog after David Bowie.
Let's get to the events of July 28th, 2021, the day in question. Actually, what we should say is July 27th is where we're going to start. We need to go through that date and then go into the early morning hours of July 28th. So Katie was off of work on the evening of July 27th. This is a Tuesday. She had dinner at her home at the apartment that she shared with Emma. So the two have dinner together, and the two dogs are at home with them, obviously, at this time as well. Emma is going to be working that night. She's also going to be working quite late that night. One of the dogs, Bowie, the younger of the two, had been cooped up for some time. It was a warm summer night. So after Emma goes off to work, Katie decided to take Bowie out for a walk. It would be good for both of them to get out, get some fresh air, and stretch their legs. This was sort of a routine for the two of them to go out for a late night walk.
Yeah, I was going to say that live in a nice community. That's one of the perks is, hey, let's go for an evening stroll, and you feel safe in that community and in that environment.
And to sort of paint this picture a little bit better, this neighborhood, it's situated so that there's businesses nearby. Both of the businesses that Katie and Emma work at are within walking distance from their apartment. There's a nice park in the area. Like the captain said, this is the type of area that it's inviting to be out and walking the streets. It's inviting to go out and take a walk. And Katie and Emma, when they would go out on walks, especially Katie with the dog, they were more evening and night people due to their work schedules. They both worked at restaurants and places that you're going to make most of your money if you work in the evening hours. So by being creatures of habit, most of the time that they're out and about would be in the evening hours or even later at night.
Right.
Like I said, this is sort of routine for Katie and Bowie to go out for a late night walk, what most of us would presume to be a late night walk. Bowie, from my understanding, was very well trained, a very well trained dog, used to walking on a leash next to his mom's. He was not the kind of dog to strain or pull away, or one that was hard to control or direct when out walking like some dogs do. He healed, walking patiently next to Katie or Emma, whoever held the leash. This night, July 27th, was no different. Although it was late, after 10, the city was well lit. Restaurants and bars were still busy. Cars and buses still drove up and down the streets. People were out on bikes. People were walking and scootering to and from wherever they're going. We don't have an exact time, Captain, when Katie set out on her walk, but we do know that it was sometime after 10 p.m. that night.
It's weird, though, how we feel if other people are out and about, that we're in a safer environment when the most dangerous animal on earth is man.
Perfect that you key in on that and bring that up here, because there was at least one person that knew Katie that after the fact would openly tell everyone, look, I worry that she thought that this park or this area, even though she had lived there for a considerable amount of time, she may have thought that this area or this park, again, it's considered to be generally safe, but this person's perspective.
But maybe she thought it was safer than it was.
Exactly. Safer than what it was this person's perspective. So sometime after 10 p.m., Katie takes the dog Bowie for a walk. At 11:35, and we have multiple witnesses to back up this timestamp here on our timeline. Bowie and Katie, they stop by Emma's work just to say hi, check in. Hey, how's it going? How's your shift? But anybody that's worked at bars or restaurants, one thing that is both good and bad about working in these environments, you don't always know, what time you got to be there and clock in. You don't always know what time your shift is going to end. Sometimes you're there until the business closes. Other times you are there until business slows down.
Right.
And you might not be able to gauge that until you have been working for several hours. So from my understanding, part of this stop was not just to say hello, but it was also, hey, typical conversation between restaurant and bar workers is going to be, what time you think you're getting off tonight? And that was part of the conversation. And so we have several people there that say hi to Katie, not just Emma, but also Katie and Emma are seen talking together. Emma is seen petting the dog Bowie. Then Katie said that she would see Emma at home after Emma's work shift that evening. I want to be clear about something here because I've heard some different versions of this story based off of different sources. And it's pretty well split down the middle, 50-50. And you know, Captain, when there's different details, we always report all sides of it because we were not at the restaurant that night. We don't know exactly what their conversation was. So it's only fair to report what we have found in our research. A lot of the reports state what we just said. Emma says, I think I'm getting off at this time, or maybe I'm working till closing. And Katie says, okay, great. I'll see you when you get home. Some of the other sources state that Katie said that she was that she would come back to the restaurant and her and Bowie, or at least Katie, would be walking home with Emma that evening.
Which makes sense. It's a nice gesture.
Yes, and I'm sure on occasion that is what exactly happened, that she would show up and go home, walk home with Emma. We should point out here, though, Katie is on foot, obviously, walking the dog. Emma rode her bike to work, which was typical of her. She rode her bike that night. So they could have been planning to walk home together. I think that if I had to choose, I'm guessing that it's more of, I'll see you when you get home, because Emma would be biking home that night. Now, we're going to move on our timeline to just after midnight. Emma bikes home from work. And when she gets to their apartment, she's surprised to not find Katie and Bowie there at home. Yeah. And anybody that's not owned dogs or had the pleasure of having a dog in the family, their other dog, Tori, is 14 years old. I've been lucky enough to have dogs that have lived to be 14, 15, 16 years old. They just don't want to walk as much as the little 3-year-old dog does.
Right.
And frankly, they start to turn into cats a little bit at some point in their old age, where they just kind of want to be left alone and they just want to kind of lay around the house. So
you're just pointing out that Katie wasn't being mean to the other dog.
It makes perfect sense that you would be walking the dog that's young and needs the exercise. I always say a tired dog is a happy dog. 14-year-old dogs are constantly tired, so they're constantly happy.
So are 40-year-old men.
Yeah. Emma arrives home, doesn't find her partner, Katie, and Bowie is not home as well. So she's like, okay, well, they've been out for a considerable amount of time at this point, but it's also not completely out of character or out of their routine. So she gets home and it's just old dog Tori all by her lonesome. As we said, it's late. It's after 12:30 a.m. by this point. Emma knew that Katie and Bowie had set out quite some time ago for their walk. Later, Emma would say in an interview, if I get home and Katie is not there, I always just call her and she always answers. But this time, she didn't answer. Emma said, I called her a bunch of times. She didn't answer. I texted her a bunch. She didn't respond. So after a bit, Emma decides to use the Find My iPhone app to see where Katie may be. She opens up the app, and of course, Katie's phone is visible. She can see the location of Katie's phone. She says that the phone was located right inside the entrance to nearby Piedmont Park, but the phone wasn't moving. This is concerning, obviously. She's out on a walk. One would expect to see the phone start moving at some point. Emma decided that she was going to head out and look for Katie. And she even stated later that she thought perhaps Katie had dropped her phone. Maybe she couldn't find it in the dark, but she really didn't know what was going on. So Emma rode her bike toward the phone location. At 12:57 a.m., she approached the gated entrance to Piedmont Park. Now, there are several entrances to this park.
Yeah, it's a big park.
This entrance is located at 10th Street and Charles Allen Drive Northeast. And as she arrived to this location, she says she could see a form lying on the ground. This visible to her from the gate area. She gets a little bit closer. She realizes this is her dog, Bowie. Bowie was lying on the roadway inside the park about 50 feet from the gate. Emma would later tell 11 Alive News, "I just ran in and I grabbed him because I didn't know maybe he was still alive. Obviously, I knew something was wrong because he was just lying there. I didn't put two and two together because I didn't notice her right away." So just to be clear here, to be crystal clear, what she's saying is that at this point, she's seeing her dog lying there lifeless about 50 feet from the gate. She doesn't know or have any clue and has not seen Katie yet.
Right.
At this point. So she's not caught sight of Katie yet. She's finding her dog and she doesn't really know what's going on. So let's continue on with her statement that she would give later. Emma says, "The first thing I noticed is I saw Bowie. He was visible from the gate of the park. He was maybe 50 feet from the gate on the inside, and she," unfortunately meaning Katie, "was further on the right." She said she thought at first that Bowie had possibly been hit by a car, because cars sometimes use that road in the park. If anybody's familiar with this park, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the area that are, as the captain pointed out, it's a large park, but if you look it up on a map, there appears to be some type of paved pathway. Now, this could be mainly for pedestrians and people on bicycles, rollerblades, what have you. And it clearly is not large enough to be a two-way street. But it does appear large enough that you could fit a car, a vehicle, golf cart, something of that nature on that pathway. And what Emma is saying is that from her experience in living near the park for a long period of time, many years, sometimes vehicles end up on that paved pathway.
Right.
The dog is laying on that pathway, and her first thought, which I think would be natural reaction, would be to think possibly he got hit. But then, of course, you're going to be wondering, well, where is my girlfriend who was walking our dog?
And also, why isn't her phone moving when I'm looking at the tracker?
Exactly. She starts calling out for Katie and looking around. She had to look at her phone again to see where Katie's phone was, and then she followed the blip on her Find My iPhone app. She sees Katie. Eventually, she finds Katie, who is lying on the ground. Again, this is to the right of where she found Bowie, but maybe about 100 feet away. Emma says that she rushed to her and saw with horror that Katie was covered in bloody, gaping wounds. And then she ran out of the park after finding her partner. Later, Emma said, quote, "I tried to feel for a pulse. It was clear that she was gone. It was dark. I didn't know what was going on. I was terrified and shocked."
Well, you also don't know if the killer is still around that area.
That's exactly right. And that's what Emma's father, Joe Clark, would later tell the news as well. He says, quote, "She ran for her life. She didn't know if someone was still here." Now, Emma calls police frantically, and this is at 1:10 a.m. So let's talk about this 911 call, because people that are familiar with this case, they know that there's been a lot of different opinions, varying opinions on persons who have tried to decipher the communication, the words, the statements made by Emma in this 911 call.
Right.
The transcription that I have here, Captain, goes something like this. Emma is stating, "I'm at the entrance to Piedmont Park. I was just searching for my girlfriend because I couldn't find her. She's dead. She's here at Piedmont Park. Please help." The dispatcher responds, "You said somebody's dead at Piedmont Park?" Emma, "Oh my God, yes. Help. Please send help. Oh my God." Dispatcher, "Where is she at the park?" Emma says she is right near the entrance. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And given a little bit of a description here, I've listened to this 911 call a few times. At this point, she's breathing heavily as she's trying to communicate with the dispatcher.
Right.
And this very likely, Captain, is from a multitude of things. Like she said, if we are to believe everything she says, she sprinted out of the park because she's terrified, having found her dog and her partner dead. And whatever happened to the two of them was a vicious attack. She fled the park, according to her statement. So one would expect her to be breathing heavily. And she's also probably terrified and in shock all at the same time. Then on the 911 call, Emma can be heard talking to someone who sounds like a man, like a man's voice, a male's voice, who's yelling something. You can't really tell what he's saying because it's in the background. It's been reported that the person was saying, "What the fuck?"
Well, because he might have came upon the dog at that point, or maybe he came upon Katie at that point, and then he's freaking out as well.
Yeah, so just to add a little better description to this, if one were to be walking in the park, jogging at night or walking through the park, what have you, this person likely may have seen Katie first. If he were to have been coming from the opposite direction, he would have seen Katie first. Who knows if he saw the dog or not? But then if his reaction was the same as Emma's to get out of the park, you're going to head toward the nearest exit entrance, and that's going to be this gated one that is at this corner of the
10th
of Charles Allen and 10th Street. So I picture this as her standing just outside, right? Because there's an intersection there. You'd feel safer out on the road. And he's probably approaching her like, what did I just see? What the hell's going on? And
Right.
So we know what it's reported that he said. He says, "What the F?" Emma responds, and you can hear her. She says something like, "Did you just see that?" And you hear the male voice respond saying, "Yes." Emma then says, "That's my fucking girlfriend." And to hear my voice say it doesn't do, you would really need to hear her say it, because there are some people that don't like the words that she's using at the time, but I think you have to hear the tone of her voice. Like she's saying it the way I hear it, the way that it hits my ear, Captain, is it sounds to me like somebody that is trying to describe an observation that they just made, but it's something they can't believe.
Can't believe and maybe don't understand.
Exactly. Like I don't know what's going on either. So then Emma tells the dispatcher, quote, "like she's dead. The dispatcher tells her help is on the way." Now, the call does last a little bit longer than this, but there's no interaction between Emma and the dispatcher after this. It sounds to me like the call continues because the dispatcher, we've heard a bunch of these 911 calls, and a lot of times the person receiving the call is now alerting emergency services, whether it be the cops, ambulance, both, fire department in some situations. And so the rest of the 911 call is the dispatcher alerting emergency services, but telling the person that he's trying to coordinate with that I think she hung up, because you have the ambulance and police who are looking for more information, near the entrance. Okay, great. What entrance? He doesn't have the person still. He doesn't have Emma still on the line to relay that information to everyone. So like we just covered, someone else found Katie. This is immediately right after Emma did. And that someone who sounds male in the background of the 911 call emerged from the park entrance that Emma ran out of, the same entrance exit that Emma ran out of.
Right.
But I want to be clear here. Police have never addressed who that person was. That to me is a big stumbling block for us as researchers and as true crime storytellers. I really want to know who this person was, where they were coming from, how long they were in the park. But we also, we need to be logical in our thinking here, because of course, one could argue, could this have been the killer, having watched Emma find Katie from the shadows? and then decided to flee and act like he didn't know what was going on either. But the flip of that would be that whoever killed Katie, whoever attacked her in the park that night, and we'll go through some more of the details of this crime, but they would have been covered in blood. And that would have been obvious to Emma from outside of the park. Once that intersection is well lit, and she would have been able to see, likely been able to see that the person was covered in blood. One detail that I think is key here is because it was so late at night, technically the park is closed at this time. Like the gates are still open, and I believe that they close and lock those at some point. But what we do know is there are restrooms, public restrooms, male, female restrooms at this park, at a couple different locations. And so one thought that I had here was the restrooms, it's been confirmed and reported that they were already closed and locked up for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Could this have just been somebody who just decided to stop into the park to try to use one of those restrooms, finds the door locked, and then stumbles upon this horrible situation and gets out of Dodge? But the other thing, too, to keep in mind is if this were the killer, he would not have had the ability to go into one of those bathrooms and wash up there. He could not have cleaned up before fleeing and being spotted by Emma as he's leaving the park. As a True Crime Garage listener, you know the world can be a dangerous and unpredictable place. With every case, we've learned one thing. Your best line of defense is your vigilance and preparation. That's why you should invest in Simply Safe Home Security today. Simply Safe was named Best Home Security Systems 2024 by the U.S. News and World Report. Newsweek ranked it Best Customer Service in Home Security. This is whole home protection, with sensors to detect break-ins, fires, floods, and more, plus a variety of indoor and outdoor cameras. It's backed by 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. No contracts and a 60-day money-back guarantee. 60-day money-back guarantee, plus you can try it for $1 a day. You have nothing to lose. I've protected my home. Give Simply Safe a try. I think you're going to love it. Simply Safe has given me and many of my listeners real peace of mind. I want you to have it too. Get 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/garage. That's simplysafe.com/garage. There's no safe like Simply Safe. The best part of spring cleaning takeaway is the post-clean clarity you get. It's kind of like when you find out that you've been paying a fortune for wireless. When Mint Mobile has phone plans for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's time to switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's limited time deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. Save a lot of money with Mint Mobile. Get their great mobile wireless service delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. That's premium service at a great price. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/TCG. That's mintmobile.com/TCG. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/TCG. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Everyone loves a good family mystery, especially one with as many twists and turns as June's Journey, a hidden object mystery game with a captivating detective story. It takes you back to the glamour of the 1920s with a diverse cast of characters. You'll step into the role of June Parker and search for hidden clues to uncover the mystery of her sister's murder. Use your observation skills to quickly uncover key pieces of information that lead to chapters of mystery, danger, and romance. And customize your very own luxurious estate island. Think expansive gardens and beautiful buildings. Collect scraps of information to fill your photo album and learn more about each character. And you can chat and play with or against other players by joining a detective club. Can you crack the case? Download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android. June needs your help, detective. Download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android.
All right, we are back. Cheers, mates. Cheers to you, Colonel.
Cheers to you, Captain.
Okay, so many questions that I have so far.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's very possible because this park is so large and they don't lock the gates that some people local to this area would still use it as a way to travel. I'll go into the park and use those paths to get from point A to B. So the person could have still been in the park and just leaving the park, or maybe they're using the park to commute.
Yep.
I'm sure they know who this individual is, but is it possible that you commit a crime, you discard of your clothes, change your clothes, and then you happen upon the scene as if you don't know what's going on? And then I think there's a lot of questions that law enforcement is going to have with Emma, Katie's partner. What time did you leave work? What time did you get to the park? I'm sure if she's telling the truth that the information that they probably could have got off of her cell phone would track her whereabouts. But also, like you said, it's a very dramatic and tragic situation. So you do things that might not be great, and you might have some actions that compromise the crime scene, like picking up the dog or touching the victim. And then we every crime documentary where there's a 911 call, you can spend hours, if not days, dissecting what the person meant by the tone in their voice, their actions, what choice of words they used. We don't know how we'd react ourselves unless we were in that situation. I think if I was ever in a true crime documentary and I found somebody murdered and I called 911, people would be dissecting that call saying he's too calm, because normally when I've been in situations that are emergencies and have had to call 911, I know that the information I give to them is going to be so important to help the victim, right? I could see myself being too calm and then people making comments, well, this guy was so calm, he must be the killer. But I don't think it's out of bounds that law enforcement would go, hey, we got to look into Emma's story, what's true, what's not true, and look at the background of their relationship as well.
After the 911 call, obviously police swarmed to the park. They saw immediately that this was not just your run-of-the-mill big city stabbing. Quote, it's a gruesome scene, end quote. This comes from Deputy Police Chief Charles Hampton. Some of the cops on the scene described it as, quote, hard to stomach.
Right.
So Katie and Bowie, unfortunately, are both found dead at the park. And this is dead upon arrival for everybody responding to the scene. This isn't put them in an ambulance and they died on the way to the hospital or died at the hospital. This is, unfortunately, were killed in the park, and it's obvious. And that goes back to Emma's statement that she says, I didn't know what to do, but it was obvious she was gone. It's been described, and forgive me for the crudeness of this statement, but it's been described that like Katie had been cut to ribbons is at least one of the descriptions that was provided.
Well, and I think that's why law enforcement wasn't saying that this looked like a typical big city stabbing, because typically in a stabbing case, it's somebody trying to rob somebody. Maybe the victim didn't have something to give to the robber, or they put up a fight. The robber stabs him a couple times and leaves them. This is not that. This seems like a vicious personal murder.
Well, and we'll let the listeners decide for themselves what they think, because we're going to go and we're going to talk about the autopsy report here in, I apologize in advance, in graphic detail. So skip ahead if needed. What was done to Katie was incredibly gruesome. And we are not going through these details to be gross or disturbing or any of that. But because her injuries, I think the investigators would agree with this statement, could potentially tell us a lot about her killer.
Right.
And may even help form theories about the murder itself. Katie's autopsy was performed on Friday, July 30th, 2021 by medical examiner Karen Sullivan, MD. When the 40-year-old Katie's body was brought in, she still had her right earbud in and her socks and shoes on. She was wearing her t-shirt, and her pants and underwear were as they were found, which we will get into in a moment. But all of these items, of course, were removed and then placed into evidence. Real quick on the earbud thing. Katie, like many people out walking or exercising, she actively was listening to music or podcasts. And so given that the earbud is found still in place in the right ear, it's believed by Emma and police that she was probably walking through the park that evening, listening to something on her phone, which could mean that she may have never even heard her attacker approaching her.
Right.
Katie was stabbed upwards of 50 times, 50 times, more than that. The autopsy report says that her death was due to sharp force injuries of her face, neck, and torso. But that doesn't even begin to describe the wounds. Essentially, somebody carved her up. She had at least 15 incised wounds from her forehead to her chin, slicing cuts that flayed her skin open in an X pattern. This including her nose and lips. Both eyelids were sliced through, and both lips cut all the way through to the underlining tissue. Both carotid arteries were cut in a gaping 9¼ inch by 5½ incised wound, inflicting several overlapping slashes. The cuts to her throat were so deep that they went all the way through to the vertebrae and through to the muscles on the back of her neck. This is probably the hardest part of the autopsy report. Her heart was still beating while those injuries occurred. She had sharp force injuries to both breast and multiple stabs to her upper and lower back, the back wounds penetrating her aorta and left lung and liver, meaning these are very deep wounds. Those areas had started to fill with blood. This again meaning that her heart was beating while this happened as well. There was also at least 14 sharp force injuries that spanned the lower back. And she had a multicolored tattoo on the lower back region. Now, there's been a lot of speculation over the past 2.5 years, roughly, since this murder took place, the last almost 3 years since this murder took place, about what that meant. Some had speculated that it might be a pride tattoo and that the killer was trying to destroy the pride tattoo. To be completely clear here, there's never been any confirmation that I could find of what the tattoo was of. So when you hear that or you read that somewhere, please note that that is just speculation. Katie had sharp force injuries of the abdomen with evisceration of the small intestine. Hemorrhaging in the bowel indicates that she was alive while this was done to her as well. Defects in the shirt correspond to wounds on the body. What that means to the layperson is she was stabbed through the shirt. So the holes in the shirt, unfortunately, line up with the holes in the body underneath the shirt. But what we do know, Captain, is that then at some point, the attacker or attackers lifted up her black t-shirt that she was wearing because they found the letters F-A-T were carved into her lower chest and abdomen area. She's listed as weighing 155 pounds and almost 5'7" tall. So even though the letters F-A-T are carved into her, she's not fat by any means at all. Right. And we can kind of try to get into the killer or the attacker's head here and after we get through some of the details of the crime to see if that means anything. But she's totally normal, healthy size for her age. So
were the letters capitalized or? So
here's the description, the best description that I could find. The F and the A were on the right side of the midline of her body and the T on the left. Okay. The T being the deepest of the three. So that's the deepest wound of the three letters. Each letter was several inches tall to try to describe it. The way that I read this, Captain, the autopsy report, the way that it's described, the person would have had to have been standing over top of her to obviously to do this. Mm-hmm. And it might have been, we'll keep going through the information here, but these letters may have been upside down due to how the killer was standing above the victim. Her pants and underwear were down around her knees when she was found. There was sharp force injury to the lower back area. There were no vaginal injuries and no sign of rape, according to the ME. She had lots of defensive wounds on her hands, as we would expect. She also had multiple contusions indicating that she was beaten with something. You know, she's not just stabbed. She was beaten with something as well. And this could have been simply something as simple as fist, or it could have been an actual object.
Yeah,
there was,
or the backside of the handle of the knife.
Yeah, we don't have anything conclusive to say if it was a heavy metal object or anything like that. It's just simply saying that she was beaten with something, possibly fist.
Okay, two things, and give your thoughts on these. To me, okay, there's no physical evidence of sexual assault, but I think that's kind of misleading because if she's found with her pants and her underwear around her ankles, that almost seems like that's what the perpetrator was attempting, but maybe just weren't able to commit the assault. And then my other thing, do you believe this is one attacker because we have different wounds that are telling us that there's technically different instruments used? Is it possible that there's two attackers?
I think that it's possible. I want to refrain from using the word likely because I could see this being a single attacker and multiple attackers. I think what lends itself to one thinking that maybe we have multiple attackers here is the presence of the dog.
Yeah.
Right. This is a young 50-pound dog. It's a decent sized dog, a pit bull. So they're typically fast and protective dogs. Mm-hmm. So the presence of the dog makes it more complicated, obviously, for one perpetrator to commit this, unless you are able to neutralize the threat of the dog quickly. But the earbud still being in, almost, that is indicative to me of a surprise attack, of some type of ambush.
Yeah, I agree.
So then you have to play this out and go, well, how could somebody surprise and ambush the victim, but also neutralize the dog at the same time? And that's where you circle back and go, well, was there multiple attackers? The other thing that I want to present here, and I don't know why I can't shake this idea. If the dog is very well behaved and responds to being called and listens, you're out at night. Yeah, there's other people out walking and around and such, but once you go into the park, this is a large open area. Is there a chance that you let the leash go or let Bowie off the leash and he stumbled upon something before you did.
Right.
That's the way that I could see this playing out and working. And I hate to use that word, but when you have to look at these things the way that a detective would. How did this play out, and how does this make sense logically that what we know happened? And so that's how I feel like this possibly works. Now, back to what you said about the pants being pulled down. I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I agree with you. That could be exactly the situation where the attacker thought about raping or sexually assaulting the victim and for some reason did not, for any number of reasons. The other thought that I had too is based off of the carving the letters into the victim seems that has to be important to the killer, or he would never have done that. Was it just out of necessity? Like when he pulled up the shirt, right? He already stabbed her through the shirt.
Yeah.
He then pulled up the shirt because the letters FAT are not through the shirt. The shirt was lifted up and then carved into the body. Was it necessary for him to pull down the pants to do that too? I don't know. We have a general location of where those letters were carved, but not the exact location.
Well, then it also makes you wonder, is the pulling down of the pants and underwear, is it to suggest the sex of the attacker?
Yeah, well, to me, the viciousness of the attack is suggestive of the gender of the attacker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just playing the numbers here, but an attack this violent is almost always a male attacker. Now, you and I've reviewed a lot of cases. I shouldn't say a lot of these cases, because just like the cops and detectives are pointing out, this is different from the homicides they've investigated in the very big city of Atlanta, Georgia. But one case, and I know this to be true in a couple cases, but I can think of one right away where they initially suspected sexual assault on the victims because the pants were found to have been, they were down around the knees or ankles of the victims. And later they determined there was no sexual assault, and they figured out that the victims had been dragged, and the way that they were dragged, it's very hard to pick up an entire human being, an adult human being. So oftentimes you drag them by the legs, the feet, the arms, the shoulders, what have you. And in that case, they were able to determine, based off of the drag marks and off of other things that they were seeing on the body, that the pants were found pulled down to the knees and ankle area simply because the perpetrators had dragged and moved the bodies, and just by dragging them along the ground, that surface is what pulled and tugged at the pants to where they were found eventually.
Well, and did law enforcement find any evidence of Katie being dragged?
I found one report that says that she may have been dragged, and that to me is really something that I'm very invested in trying to get to the bottom of. And if I had that information, trust me, it would be here, because there are two things in this case that to me, I really want to know the answers to, and we can get to some of that stuff in the theories. But wrapping up the autopsy information here, as we said, unfortunately, Katie was still alive while some of these wounds were being inflicted. So whoever did this, what we can say with certainty, Captain, is whoever did this was incredibly vicious and likely wanted her to suffer.
Well, and like you said, most likely completely covered in blood.
Yes, and Katie was stabbed both in the front and back. So someone very deliberately turned her over to continue inflicting penetrating wounds.
And unless they attacked her from behind and then she turned around to defend herself, and then the attack continued.
How deep and how severe a lot of these wounds are, I would be surprised if she was standing for very long into this attack. I think she's we talked about neutralizing the threat of the dog. I think she's been neutralized and taken down to the ground rather quickly. Now, nothing has been released about the type of weapon used, so we don't know for sure what weapon was used. Maybe the police do not know as well, but based on the slicing wounds and the amount of penetrating stab wounds, it had to be something very substantial, in my opinion. And this was not, just to kind of touch on motive here for a minute, this was not a typical stab and grab robbery. First of all, as far as we know, Katie wasn't robbed. Emma told the Washington Post that robbery did not appear to be the motive because they didn't take her phone. So her phone was found. And why wouldn't it be? I mean, we know that Emma was using the Find My iPhone app, or says she was, to locate Katie. Katie was wearing $200 headphones. They didn't take those headphones. They didn't take her keys. And a couple of sources, I did see that money was found on her person, a small amount of money. So as far as robbery goes, this doesn't appear to be a robbery have gone horribly wrong and turned into this vicious murder, because any items of value that she had with her that night, according to Emma, and at least what the limited information we can get from police, all of those items and possibly cash were found still on or near her when she was located in the park that night.
Well, I was going to ask you, do we know how deep the stab wounds were? Because with the amount of slashes, almost feels like a box cutter as opposed to a knife.
Well, yes, and you're right. That would be likely a sharper item that would lead to kind of these gaping large slashes and cuts. But we do know that the stab wounds were not just into the back, but they went into vital organs.
Right.
And so they were deep enough for that, but I don't know, the gaping 9 1/4 inch wound to the carotid artery area seems like, yes, like it would have to be something very sharp, like a box cutter. But then the problem with the box cutter is
it wouldn't go in 9 inches. It'd probably break off before then.
Exactly. Now that's very insightful there, Captain. The information we don't have is what kind of weapon was used, because like you said, and I would expect the same thing, that a box cutter, the blade would break off, would have been found at the scene or somewhere on our victim here.
But it's open case, so we're not privy to all the information. So for all we know, a blade was found inside her, and they're keeping that information back because that's something that only the attacker would know.
Exactly. They may know. Just because it's not been released doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know exactly what kind of weapon killed the victims. My mind kind of went to something like the Moscow College, the Idaho College murders, with that kind of more like
with
large
that shit bag, that giant
Rambo
shit bag of a person.
Yeah, like a large Rambo style blade. But again,
yeah,
we don't know, and we're not medical examiners, so it's difficult for us to review these wounds and tell you what kind of.
Well, maybe we are, but we're just not telling people we are.
So, if it wasn't robbery,
and it wasn't a sexual assault,
right? It's like then now you go into considering the wounds that were inflicted on our victim and the amount of wounds. So that's telling too, because that tells us the attacker took time to do what he wanted to do. And this is where my mind goes with this. There are a lot of people that are suspicious of Emma, and we will definitely get into why that may be. I don't see so much a reactionary attack here. This to me sounds a lot more like all of the FBI books and stuff that I've reviewed, all of these serial killer types that we've reviewed, where it's like they create this fantasy of what they want to do to somebody, how they want to attack someone, and then took the time and felt like they had the time to do what he wanted to do to the victim. We know that this took a considerable amount of time. How much time is hard to say, but it does not appear, if someone's choosing to carve letters into a victim, that is suggestive to me that this killer or attackers did not feel rushed. And the letters are that's a very deliberate act. Carving letters into the torso of a living human being in a public park in the middle of a big city, right in plain sight. I mean, she's not found behind a bunch of trees or in shrubbery or in the woods. She's lying on the ground in plain sight under a tree alongside the roadway in the park. The roadways where people would naturally walk and traverse at nighttime, especially at nighttime.
Yeah, it makes you start questioning where the attack happened. Did he drag Katie to this location so that she would have been found? Again, if we have her phone, can we track the movements of her phone? Obviously, that's information that the police would probably want to hold back. But we're dealing with a very violent individual, and we're dealing with somebody. This is somebody that stabbed somebody over 50 times, basically in a public park. It wouldn't be surprising to me if this person hasn't committed other crimes similar to this attack.
Well, and the thing here to me is if this were a thrill kill, was that part of the thrill for the killer? Just the fact that they would have the riskiness of doing it in a public location, walking this fantasy as far as you can to the edge without going over the edge. And now I've seen some estimates that have been put forth by experts here that vary, that say that, if this thing went down really quick and happened really fast, it's possible, not likely, but possible, all of these injuries could have been inflicted in as little as 3 minutes time or as many as 10 minutes time. And I have to believe that it's probably closer to beyond the 5-minute mark, somewhere between 5-6 minutes and that 10-minute mark is what I would be guessing. And if that's the case, anybody could have walked by and caught a glimpse of this killer hunched over top of a victim. So was that part of, if it was a thrill kill, was that part of the thrill, not just the attack itself or the riskiness of the attack, but also the location and the possibility of being discovered or being sighted and then having to flee?
Yeah, and that's probably where I disagree with you a little bit. To me, the stab wounds and the slashes, I think, could happen within a very short amount of time. The time period then elapses a little longer when the killer has to reach up, pull the shirt up, and then start carving in letters. But I still think all of that could have taken place under 3 minutes easily.
Right, but that's not my opinion. My opinion is 5 to 6 minutes, somewhere between that and 10 minutes. That's experts' opinions, that as little as 3 minutes and as many as 10. Now, and I'm not the only one to say this either, but the fact that Katie was alive while much of this took place,
right?
This implies, based on the time and the care, for lack of a better term, that the killer took with this handiwork, is highly suggestive that the attacker is some type of sexual sadist, someone who gets pleasure out of the pain that they inflict on the victim.
So much more to get to in this case. Please join us back here in the garage. Until then,
be good, be kind, and don't litter.
Ameristar Council Bluffs was voted best casino in the area for a reason. You'll find more than 1,200 slots and a variety of table games, all available 24/7. We have multiple restaurants, including a buffet, with all-you-can-eat crab legs on Fridays, prime rib on Saturdays, and brunch on Sundays. An action-packed sports bar and a sports book with the best odds in town. Your best bet for entertainment is Ameristar Council Bluffs. Must be 21 to enter. Casino terms subject to change. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.